Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. Guys, plenty to get to today from an NFL wildcard weekend that lived up to the billing, plus the Hurricanes and Hoosiers going head-to-head for the ultimate hardware. But first, a throwback segment for longtime listeners with a deep dive inside Prime Sports. Adam, you've shared some internal data for 2025 across all 4 states in which Prime Sports and BetCris operate. So let's bring in the audience on a peek behind the curtain, going state by state, and then tying it all together, kicking things off in New Jersey, which I found to be pretty fascinating with the data you shared, given the scale, more than $142 million in handle last year, a small overall loss, and massive monthly swings. How much of what you saw from New Jersey last year was a signal to you that the model worked as intended in an efficient market, as opposed to a signal that the risk model may need to evolve a bit?
So for me, New Jersey, where I think it stands out is we've got a lot of arbitrages. I've said that for all the way along. So generally, we were actually winning in New Jersey up until November, and then we lost 600,000 in those last 2 months. So ended up with a 400,000 loss. But it was kind of on track with what I thought it was without diving into it too much, in a sense of it was steady. Yes, the swings are up and down, but it felt like we're in front up until that sort of last point. The good thing about New Jersey is we lost 400,000, and I imagine we made at least $1 million in fuck-ups, whether that was technology fuck-ups, whether that was fat finger ones. New Jersey, you cannot void bad bets. Generally straightforward. They will not look at anything favorable on the operator. Instead of punching in minus 120, you punch in minus 1,200. Someone's quick enough to grab the other side at plus 700, 800, whatnot. They generally are getting to keep those bets. So the upside of that in general is I honestly believe that we've made 7 figures in errors or bad bets or anything of that nature. So sort of New Jersey stays on path of the crown jewel of the whole ecosystem for what we're trying to do, potentially even maybe looking at moving into after this acquisition. There is casino licenses per se, whatnot, of potentially, slapping one of those on the ass of this thing and see even that can help the cash flow. But all in all, I think if we were to have one state and New Jersey was that one state, I'd have somewhat some confidence going into that, tackling that, cleaning up the processes, the latency, the data, the technology, some of those things that just aren't purely trading issues, and keep striving forward with that. But yeah, when you have, I don't know, what was there, 700 plus uniques in November, December, call it 699 of those are assassins. I think it worked out pretty well.
And from New Jersey to Ohio, where we saw a generally similar trend line, but a deviation in December for the best, Ohio showing an uptick at the end of the year in terms of users, wagers, handle, and hold. Adam, why do you think we saw this in Ohio?
So I think Ohio was seeing a steady tick. We had, I think it was 300 uniques in February and 700 in March. And that was off the back of a bit of a radio campaign and a few other things. So I think towards the end of the football season, there was some bonus things run out and of that nature. There were some headlines, not necessarily good headlines, but headlines sort of going into November as well, where, I think we've come out, I think on these numbers, we've come out well in a sense of Prime Sports announced their bankruptcy, uniques and all those kind of things didn't dip. Looking back at the New Jersey stuff, November was unique this year where it actually had 5 weekends. So that's, any kind of spikes and that in the business of that is inevitable when you have 5 weekends in 1 month. And then when you dug into the Ohio, you saw 9 losing months, 3 winning months, which was pretty much controlled by one player, which is kind of started somewhat on the good side for January as well. But Ohio is a tough state. Their taxes, their regime, everything. For me, if we lost Ohio going forward, it wouldn't be a bad thing. It'd be just sort of working out how to take this model, and it definitely has some flaws, and try and sort of build it slowly and keep going forward. But yeah, Ohio was a tough state at the end of the day, but equal in volume, I think 20% less wages and somewhat similar uniques as New Jersey.
I hear you on Ohio being tough overall and New Jersey being tough, especially at the end of the year. It was a different story in Kentucky, where Prime launched in July, went deeply in the red through October, and then ended up profitable for the year. Adam, what do you think drove that green surge to close out 2025 in Kentucky?
I think players and just understanding the player base and some of the trading. We definitely got some more favorable results as well. I think the industry as a whole, September, October were really rough months. November, December, I think have been bookmaker months for the most part, kind of the opposite to last season. So any of those stock buyers out there, when those quarter reports are coming out in sort of March, April, that last quarter of the year wasn't too bad for a DraftKings or a FanDuel, I imagine. But I think that's just generally it. The trading sort of tightened up a little bit. Volume went up. It's when you've got minimal volume in those first few months and the amount of players, it's hard to get it. You need liquidity. You need sort of the ability to write some action back and things like that. But yeah, Kentucky and Arizona, which get into shortly, is kind of a little bit more of a recreational play, a little bit different. I imagine there's some arbitrages there, both with Circa and us in Kentucky. But yeah, it felt like it was a little softer clientele and a little bit more friendly on that side of it.
And you alluded to Arizona, so let's go there as well. From the 3 prime sports states to the BetCris state, if you will, we saw a steady climb in users, wagers, and handle throughout the year, plus the smoothest monthly hold swings and the strongest annual hold by quite a margin. How much of this is BetCris being different than prime sports, the West being different than the rest of the country, or any other noteworthy factors?
So yeah, I mean, Arizona was interesting, really. I mean, we had less than 100 players a month for the first 6-7 months, definitely driven by football season coming into it. We saw a clear sort of leap there. We also started to do a bit more of social media sort of marketing, smaller pieces, but really on the overall aspect, there hasn't really been any marketing done or any proper marketing done on any of these states, which is kind of what we're now using this as a baseline to build upon it. But I think Arizona, we had a bit more of, again, the brand was a bit more acknowledgeable. Nevada, there was definitely some people heading down to Exit 2 and across the border playing that, or had friends there as well, which a lot of them were just waiting for football season to pick up as well. But yeah, I mean, across the state, it was a lot more of a pleasant, smooth roll throughout it, and our best performing state. And as you said, on the hold as well. But I think that's where, we haven't even touched the sort of Spanish translations and things like that in Arizona, which is definitely on our radar with the BetCris brand and being bordered there to Mexico, whatnot. So all in all, it is what it is, but now we have a baseline to work on. And with 2026 hopefully being the year, that it's laid out to be, we'll see an improvement and a step forward.
And tying this all together, the 4 states combined to lose almost $1 million in 2025. Actually commendable on one hand, as you touched on, Adam, given that you're taking on the sharpest of the sharp in a lot of cases, but unsustainable on the other hand, given the realities of running a business. So if we're to assume the market continues to get sharper, more efficient, and more competitive, how does this model win in the long term?
I don't know if it does. But again, the idea is sort of taking it and seeing what you can do with it. 100% when we look at sort of the breakdown of leagues and sports and things like that, it's going back and reviewing, how do you tackle this? This is more a meat and potatoes business. So let's be that. Let's not too worried about too much player props. Same game parlays have actually been alive and doing decently since it's been there. But it's a limited menu per se of what can be put into those things. I think it's more just leaning into what we're good at and concentrating on, the higher players looking to bet the top level markets, not necessarily the tens of thousands of minions that are more into player props or smaller wages and things like that. It's really just targeting what we know, what we're good at, taking a decent bet from a decent player, decent limits from everybody in general. Just trying to do a little bit better with the errors and mistakes, because definitely there's issues with the technology. Definitely there was issues with risk management and whatnot. We made a change sort of, I think it was around April, May, where we put a lot more of our Asian trading base onto that, and there was a lot less mistakes made. We've sort of just been looking at this differently and now getting ready to spend some marketing dollars and looking to acquire Prime Sports and sort of take over the reins of driving that as well and seeing what we can do with that. But all in all, this is a tough business, and we're coming at it from probably a tougher angle than most. And I think you'll see some changes, not necessarily limitation changes, but concentrating on what product and what not we're going after versus some of the carnival games and those things.
And with that, as we hit about 11 minutes into the show, we'll go ahead and pivot from a roller coaster of a year for Prime Sports and BetCris to a roller coaster of a weekend for football fans. Adam, we'll stick with you here. What were your biggest results across the college football playoff semifinals and NFL wildcard weekend?
college football sucked. Would have loved that old miss win there at the end, but Miami getting up and the covering didn't help. And then, I mean, Indiana was just, it was over within, what was it, third, fourth possession.
A pick six on the first play.
It was just a mess. So that wasn't great. NFL, Sunday was horrible. We had a really good week. I was ready to pronounce a second week of lots of green, and Sunday was just a massacre. Buffalo Bills wasn't a good result. San Fran money line was good, and that was decent. Patriots against your Chargers, Mats. I mean, boys just didn't show up. Who else played this week? The Saturday games, Green Bay, Chicago. I mean, Saturday was some insane games. Chicago ended up coming back. Thought we might have had a good result in Ohio based off that comeback and the way we have a couple of plays betting there. Saturday was all right. Sunday was just not good at all.
And Joe, let's bring you into the fold here by validating the notion that misery loves company, with Mrs. Brennan's Packers, your Eagles, and my Chargers all shown the door over these past couple of days. Without coordinating ahead of time, as people viewing this on YouTube and Spotify will see, it looks like we knew the assignment and dressed accordingly for our team's funerals. But beyond any frustration as a fan, what are your takeaways from the college football playoff semifinals, as well as the first 5 games of wildcard weekend before it wraps up tonight with Texans Steelers?
I mean, for college football finals, I think finally Indiana has broken through. There's been a lot of skepticism about their quality. You've heard all the different narratives. I mean, I think it's too much for people to comprehend that you could have this school that was the losingest D1 program, and now suddenly they're in the conversation. It's amazing how quickly we turn on the narrative dime here that, oh, they have to be in the conversation for greatest college teams ever. But like with just roaching Oregon, because that's all it was. I mean, to Oregon's defense, they never show up for a big game anyway. So I was never much of a believer in them. But it's pretty amazing to see how it's gone. Now they get to play for the national championship against the number 3 team from the ACC, the non-power power football conference. And this will be an interesting game. I do think it's interesting, the narrative now, because you can't have somebody get ahead without having just like the beginning of a little bit of a backlash. And so this narrative where, well, Indiana's doing it on the back of having 25-year-old transfer students, while, the power schools were they were recruiting 19-year-old freshmen, and, the advantage that they have, and who cares? I mean, it's interesting to have a fresh perspective at the top, but I give Miami more of a puncher's chance in this one, just simply because Miami has in the past performed well when the lights come on and when playing as an underdog in a national championship game. So I think all the way back to when Miami beat Oklahoma for the national championship in the Brian Bosworth years, they were not even supposed to be on the same field. And that Howard Schnellenberger coach team just absolutely roached Oklahoma. So I wouldn't count them out yet and put the crown on Sig just yet. Regarding the wild cards weekend for the NFL, I guess the less we say about that, the better, both from a betting perspective and then from a fan's perspective. I do want to say this for anybody, and you have a lot of voices saying okay, now because we have legalized sports betting, it's taking all the romance out of sports. And, people are just going to be in it for, the money and things like that. I think all you got to do is look at somebody here like me, it's in the business, and see that now, you know what? Yeah, it is about the money and everything like that, but you can still very much care about that team that you followed since childhood. So I won't be looking at social media now, at least as far as football is concerned, until sometime in August. And it's only 29 days until pitchers and catchers report to Clearwater, Florida. Go Phillies.
Well, if you're not looking at social media for anything football related for the next few months, how are you going to know who the Eagles offensive coordinator is going to be come next season?
Okay, I will make an exception for fire Kevin Patullo news and the fact that he is not, as of this recording, yet been forced into the unemployment line. I'm mightily disappointed at that, but I mean, give Jeffrey Loria a little time to clear his head. If he did as much raging around his household as I did last night after the Eagles lost, and oh my God, the filth coming out of Mrs. Brennan's mouth on Saturday night when her Packers lost, we clearly got a pretty hefty psychiatrist bill coming for our 10-year-old who heard words come out of her mother's mouth that she didn't think existed.
And Adam, it may have been a matter of biting your tongue as well, given some of the results that you spoke to. I did want to circle back on the results you shared, because I would have guessed before we recorded this episode, you would have had a pretty good weekend. It seems like, at least in my sphere, a lot of the bettors I respect and hear from the most were almost unanimously on Jacksonville, on Philadelphia, on a fairly high-scoring game in Foxborough last night. And then I also think about a recurring theme on this show, live betting increasingly becoming a bigger part of this picture. And if I'm recalling correctly, the first 3 games of the weekend all saw the team trailing at the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter, win the game outright. Niners Eagles also in doubt at the 2-minute warning of that one. So how much of what you shared was driven by pregame action, and how much did live betting play a role in your bottom line from wildcard weekend?
Yeah, live wasn't good. And the Bills in particular, it wasn't good. And that sort of, I guess, covered most of the action from yesterday. Got off to a bad start and just couldn't get it back. As I said, the pregame on the 49ers game was good. A little bit of live action was decent. But then on the Patriots, they just kept betting the Patriots. Once it looked like that game was done and dusted, I think the line got down to 2.5 at one point, and they just kept coming that side. And then, the rest is history.
Any noteworthy needs for Texans Steelers tonight, or anything you'll be watching particularly closely in running for that one?
No, actually, we were looking like we were going to need the Texans all week, and then now it's sort of balanced up a fair bit since yesterday. Still like 90% of the master money is on the Steelers. But yeah, overall, it started to balance up overall.
How much of that master money is on the Steelers at soft 3.5s that were out there compared to the line we're currently looking at?
Looking at it is the +3 is still about 84% of it, with a bit of the +3.5, and some bought it up to 4. But on the other side of that, it's a bit of 2.5 that they bought it down to, and 3 is the most of that as well.
All right, well, plenty to look ahead to tonight shortly after this episode publishes, and beyond tonight, keeping the bigger picture in mind. Again, it all comes down to Miami and Indiana for the national championship in college football, while 8 teams remain standing in the NFL once we have a winner of Houston-Pittsburgh this evening. Adam, what are the most noteworthy nuggets you can share on the title game and divisional round since hanging openers and taking some early action?
Yeah, so Indiana opened 7, currently now solid on 8.5. They were bet pretty hard, pretty fast. Master money as well. Looking at about 70% of the money on Indiana right now. A bit more balanced on the master chart because once the 7 got taken early, smaller limits, now it's coming back a little bit at the 8.5 they're playing there. In the pro games for next week, Seattle opened 6.5, quickly got to 7.5. Majority of the money sitting on them. Not as much interest in the Bills-Broncos game. I guess it's sort of looking like a pick'em game. 1.5, 2, I think it opened at. Rams getting the action against the Bears, both overall and on the master chart. That one opened up 3, moved quickly to 3.5. A few people bought it up to 4, 4.5 on the other side. And that's sort of pretty much summing it up for where it's at right now.
And you might know where I'm coming from with this follow-up question. I've mentioned teasers on the show quite a bit. When I hear you talk about that Saturday doubleheader, we're looking at Bills -1.5 at Denver, and then the Seahawks -7.5 hosting San Francisco. I feel like Broncos Seahawks would be a slam dunk teaser for a lot of bettors. And this may have been a technical limitation on my end. I tried to place that at a book where risk management is handled by Planetech. I was unable to do so. I'm wondering if there's anything about teasers this early in the betting cycle that you're looking to protect against with lines like that in such an efficient market at this stage of the playoffs, or if it's just a matter of, hey, try to set an efficient point spread and teasers be down, let the chips fall where they may.
No, I'm not sure where the case is because teasers are open and you pretty much nailed it on the head, whether it's super teasers where they're putting them up 10 points to the 11.5, or the other side on the Broncos to 7.5. But there is definitely teaser money involved in those numbers.
All right, I'll get back at it shortly after we have this recording and see if I can get a piece of a Broncos Seahawks teaser myself. But in the meantime, Joe, also want to get your 2 cents on this. What are you going to be watching for most closely between Hurricanes Hoosiers and the divisional round of the playoffs, minus your favorite team, my favorite team, and Mrs. Brennan's favorite team?
Well, when I look at the futures markets, I am still just utterly mystified that the Rams kind of continue to defy gravity with the second shortest odds in both to win the NFC behind the Seahawks, and then, the second shortest to win the Super Bowl behind the Seahawks. There was nothing that I saw on display in their game against the Panthers. And the Panthers, I mean, God bless them, tough team. They were a tough out, obviously playing at home. You could maybe say they had that going for them, although, home field advantage isn't what it was. But I can't believe the amount of money that is in on the Rams, both on the future stuff and then on the sides. Like right now, you've got the Rams traveling to Chicago, and they are a 3.5 point road favorite playing outside in Chicago in January. I mean, obviously, Chicago, Green Bay, a really tight game. When you look at Chicago, the number of games, what was that? Their sixth comeback, like fourth quarter comeback this season. Again, like I said, I am mystified at the Rams' sway over people, and I'm only gonna just guess that, because Stafford, as far as we know, is still the leading candidate in the MVP race. Rams seem to be more of a public team this year. Gosh, they seem to get all the attention. That must account for at least half of the helium under their balloon.
I'm going to jump in really quickly, if I may, as you mentioned Stafford, because his throwing hand seemed to take a beating against Carolina. Adam, I see this point spread, and I feel like it's pricing in Stafford and the Rams at pretty much full strength. Was there any thought that went into opening this number on your end to account for a bit of Stafford limitation, or is there anything you've seen from the market so far to indicate just how healthy you think he's going to be come kickoff in Chicago?
Hadn't been no mention of that, but yeah, for me, myself, when I was looking at that number, I was surprised that it was 3.5 sitting at. I actually watched probably more NFL this weekend than what I had all season. And both Josh Allen and Matt Stafford, I think, looked like they had a bit of issues with their hands and getting beaten up and whatnot.
I guess in fairness, Caleb Williams' ankle looked like it turned pretty sideways, and he looked like Superman coming out of it to finish the game, but maybe both quarterbacks in Rams Bears going to be dealing with a lot this week.
Yeah, but that was the one game standing out. Again, the home dog, those two don't look like there's that much between them, maybe except for the quarterback role. But if the weather and whatnot, it's the one that I'll definitely be hoping that we're on Chicago again and seeing how that sort of plays out.
Cool. Joe, didn't mean to cut you off, but I had to get Adam's thoughts on that Rams Bears matchup given the factors you laid out. But what else with what we're going to be watching for in the week to come?
No, I mean, other than that, also, I mean, Buffalo continues to, capture the hearts and minds right now, third shortest odds in the futures markets. Although, obviously they're first to win, the shortest odds to win the AFC. And then, I mean, just the fact, it's amazing, like the low level of respect for the high seeds in the playoffs this year. And here you have Denver. They're the 1 seed in the playoffs in the AFC. Traveling to Denver used to be considered one of those like, oh my God, you're going up there to the thin air of Denver. It's practically like playing in the Himalayas. Buffalo coming off of a really tough game, really physical game, and still a 1-point road fave over the Broncos. So, I mean, I hope my theory that I had about the Eagles and Buffalo being like two just grizzled veteran teams that wanted to see the regular season play out so they could just get down to business in the postseason. Well, I hope that's still the case for Buffalo. I would definitely be backing them, but it really shows that the 1 seed, higher seeds just aren't respected. I mean, Chicago, a 3.5 point dog at home in freezing cold January as a 2 seed. Amazing.
All right. Well, with that, plenty to look out for in the week to come. We will recap it all next week, but we will tie a bow around this week's episode to the audience. For a lot of you, like Joe and myself, your team may be knocked out, but no matter how often an Eagles or Chargers result may knock us down, you can always count on us to get back up and keep the content coming here at Prime Suspects. Thanks as always for tuning in. Enjoy the divisional round, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at @PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.